Just breathing that we're breathing in. Unforgettable and so benevolent. The closest that we'll get to heaven sent. For all us darling aliens. And we will never be this young again. So full of fire and rebellion. No shooting out just like it's medicine. And we know we'll be born again, 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 again. This is everything we pray for. Pray for, pray for, pray for. This is everything I need. Please don't anybody pray for me. My soul isn't yours to save anymore. Life is crazy, baby. Don't forget the seatbelt. I just stop when I feel cracked. The window shut, the goddamn door. I pray I know the blessed be the sky was soaring in. So few of us and millions of them. Daylight isn't far away, my friend. And we will be born again, 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 again. Life is crazy, baby, don't forget the seatbelt. I just stop here and feel cracked. The window shut, the goddamn door. I pray I know the answer. We could die as we drive all night in the afterlife. So with you, by and by, everything I love is right into
How's it going, boys? I'm just going to try to fill some dead air while I fix whatever the hell is going on here. How is your Wednesday?
Wednesday's going good so far. Zach, I know we got an NFL show here. I just read Adrian Wojnarowski just tweeted that Russell Westbrook got traded to
Oh, shit.
Washington for John Wall in a first rounder.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Kind of forgot about John Wall. Everything's pointed that he's like good to go right away, right?
Yeah, from what I've been reading.
That is interesting on both fronts. I don't think Westbrook and Beal can work together, but I think
No.
for Houston that's good.
Right.
Huh. Anyways, okay, let's jump into football. We had a shitty Wednesday game. What a way to end the cap the week. Worth the 6-day wait, I suppose. Steelers and Ravens were kind of went as expected. Also, Robert Griffin III kind of looked like Lamar Jackson throwing the football, which is kind of even more as expected, I suppose. Not much to take away from that game, I guess, from fantasy. I guess. We'll talk about Benny Snell in the running back section here, but we will go position by position, telling you who you should be picking up. At this point in the season, it's not just for this week, it's going forward. A lot of leagues have one more week until the fantasy playoffs, so certainly be prepared for that if it looks like you are going to be one of the teams in the postseason. And if you are on the bubble, obviously just trying to go 1-0, so make moves according to that as well. But let's jump into quarterback. Quarterback every week, not a ton to talk about just because quarterback's pretty steady position. They haven't really been that impacted by injuries overall. In terms of people on bye this week, we do have Tampa and Carolina on bye, so Tom Brady owners, you probably already had a plan in place just because he has been so up and down. Same thing with Teddy Bridgewater with injuries and up and down play. But nonetheless, those two are going to be out. There's still some injuries like Drew Brees. One quarterback I have here, and it's kind of crazy that he's so low owned, in my opinion, is Phil Rivers. I have him at 13% owned in ESPN leagues. Plays at Houston this week. He plays Houston again in a couple weeks. I mean, Colts passing game in general, rest of the way, looks really good. Philip Rivers, top 10 quarterback, 4 of his last 6 games. Definitely not a person to be sleeping on. Tanner, what do you think about Philip Rivers as the top? I would call him the top quarterback pickup of the week. Would you label him that as well, or is there somebody else you may have in mind later?
Yeah, I mean, Rivers is solid going forward. I think what you said, top 10 quarterback 4 out of the last 6 weeks, really says it all right there. Um, at the beginning of the season, like I was giving Rivers a lot of hate, and I'm kind of a hater, and I've been turned around on him for at least a few weeks now. Like I recommended him as my QB streamer a couple weeks ago. Like I have confidence in him going forward for sure, and the Colts are going to be fighting for a playoff spot, and he's just playing good, consistent football like on a weekly basis right now. And if you look at his game logs, his one bad week was against Baltimore, and Baltimore's defense is arguably the best in the league. Um, I mean, T.Y. Hilton got it going this week a little bit. You got the emergence of Michael Pittman, giving him another solid weapon to throw to. So, yeah, I mean, I really like Rivers going forward. I wouldn't call him my top option because I would actually go with Tannehill there. And I don't know if we'll talk about him in more detail in a little bit, but he's just below 60%, and I love Tannehill this week.
Yeah, my opinion on Philip Rivers is kind of like maintained what it's been all year. That he has like Philip Rivers, I think, is a great quarterback. But he does make those bonehead decisions. But Zach, like you said, he plays Houston twice in the next 3 weeks, which is very appetizing. If maybe you're struggling with the quarterback, but the only thing that catches your eye with Philip Rivers is he does have that toe injury. But Philip Rivers isn't very mobile as it is, and he's going to be throwing from the pocket most of the time and not having to move around. So that shouldn't affect Philip Rivers whatsoever. And I mean, Philip Rivers is one of the toughest guys in the NFL too. I think he played like one AFC championship on a torn ACL or something. So I don't think that should have any warrant against you deciding whether to pick up Philip Rivers or not. But just like Zach, you said, he might be the top quarterback option if you're indeed in need of a quarterback. In the leagues that I'm looking at, Philip Rivers is really the only option that I like out there.
And I referenced his schedule. He plays at Houston, at Vegas, and then Houston at home. And then I guess if you get to that championship week at Pittsburgh, does look tough. But if you get there with Philip Rivers, congratulations to you. I think he is a good pickup, though. One person I wasn't going to talk about, but Tanner, you brought him up, is Ryan Tannehill. So tell me why you like him so much.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the Titans, just as a team and their offense in general. I loved what I saw from them this week against the Colts. A couple weeks ago, they played the Colts, got beat kind of bad in prime time, and I think they took it personal, and they came out in that game and looked great. And the Colts were never in it from the beginning. And if you look at Tannehill's schedule, because he had those back in week 5 and week 6, he had 4 touchdowns in back-to-back games. And then he just went into a brutal part of his schedule. Like with the exception of Cincinnati in week 8, there's Pittsburgh, then Chicago, then Indianapolis, then Baltimore, then Indianapolis again. So he's played Baltimore and Indy on the road 2 weeks in a row, and he's still gotten it done with 23. And then his schedule just totally opens up after that. So I think you've seen the down part of Tannehill's season, and I think if you pick him up, he's arguably startable the rest of the way.
To your point, yeah, schedule Cleveland this week, then at Jacksonville, then home against Detroit, and then at Green Bay. So obviously great schedule. The only thing I would be concerned about, those are obviously overall pretty poor pass defenses. I don't think you should see too much resistance there. I'm slightly worried about the offenses that Tennessee faces. If Tennessee's starting to play better defense now, since they got rid of Jadeveon Clowney, getting him the fuck off the field, they've been playing much better. And I don't trust Cleveland's offense. Obviously, Jacksonville, Detroit, I don't trust that. So if they don't put the pressure on Tennessee to score, that's my only worry. I guess if that's the biggest knock against Tannehill, that's pretty good. But yeah. Other quarterback I have here, Ryan Fitzpatrick. We don't know, I guess, if he's going to start or not. He plays Cincinnati this week, 21.6% owned. He's been a top 10 quarterback in 4 of his last 6 games played. He gets it done when he's on the field. Playing Cincinnati obviously doesn't really scare you. Running game took another hit this week, so if Gaskin doesn't come back, I think it's going to be Dwayne Washington probably starting at running back for Miami. So again, plenty of passing, plenty of scrambling for Ryan Fitzpatrick, which is just fantasy goodness. I really like him as a streaming option here. He's probably out there, and maybe they start to. I just don't really get the reason to. I don't know. He's getting hit, and he doesn't look very good. So I would assume Miami sticks with Fitzpatrick. Luke, what's your thoughts on that specifically?
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, there's no really reason to like sacrifice, but harm to his career in any point this season. He's been hurt now. He doesn't look great. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been like on every single team in the NFL too, and knows how the NFL works. He just like you said. I mean, I'm just looking at these last 3 out of 4 games. It's 21 points, 4 points, 21 points, 30 points. Like he's had almost all of his weeks that he's played, he's had over 20 points at being the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. Ryan Fitzpatrick is not a bad quarterback by any means. And I think if you're in a position where you don't know, like, should I pick him up or should I pick someone who's not Philip Rivers or Ryan Tannehill up? I think the answer has to be Ryan Fitzpatrick because Fitzpatrick can throw the ball. He can run the ball. He gets these rushing touchdowns somehow that I still don't know how Ryan Tannehill has so many rushing touchdowns. And Miami's a good team. They have a good defense. They're going to get Fitzpatrick the ball. And just like against Cincinnati, who's not good without Joe Burrow, Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be leading that offense. I think it's a great streaming option here. And now that I think of it, I might even like him a little bit more than Philip Rivers this week.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick is one of the names I've written down, and I think you can definitely stream him this week. I mean, going back to the entire beginning of the season, he was playable on a weekly basis. It felt like he was finishing as a quarterback one like almost every week, and he's not afraid to sling the ball. And taking on Cincinnati this week, like, it's a really solid matchup. I guess I could be a little worried about Cincinnati trying to put up points in this one just because Miami's defense is so good, but that's not really even that much of a concern for me. So like, I would definitely feel comfortable going with Fitzpatrick this week.
And then the only one I have written down, hear me out, I have Mitchell Trubisky. He plays at home against the Lions. He's owned in 4% of leagues. Obviously, he's out there. If you're listening to this, he's out there. I don't think they go back to Foles. I think Trubisky is a better quarterback than Nick Foles, or, whatever the hell that's worth. I think he's going to stumble into production. Detroit doesn't scare me in the absolute slightest. Trubisky's good when he knows what he's going to see. That's why he's always played well against Detroit. Go back to week 1, he finished as quarterback 8, but he plays good against Detroit every single time he plays them because they don't switch anything. They don't make adjustments. They play the same defense that they played last year, the same defense they played 2 years ago. I'm a little bit concerned, I guess, without Patricia, but even still, I don't think they make changes without Patricia there. And then it's at home. On the other side, Matthew Stafford's pissed off. Matthew Stafford, I think, is going to play well. They had extra time to prepare. I think Chicago's defense is kind of getting the soul sucked out of them a little bit. I think they're terrific, but they don't. They lost 4 in a row, I believe. I think 4 in a row, 5 of the last 6. They're doing everything. They're the only reason why they're halfway in the running to make the playoffs, and I think they're sick of it. I think they give up some big plays. I think they lose some focus this week, and I think this game could be a little bit higher scoring than what books would want to us to think, I suppose. Again, very deep leagues. I wouldn't necessarily want to go there, but I think you are desperate. Trubisky is interesting. Tanner, any thoughts on him or any other quarterbacks that I haven't brought up here?
I think the Chicago defense getting their souls sucked out is like the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Because every time I watch them, their defense is always so impressive to me, and they just need a little bit of help on the offensive side of the ball. Like I feel bad for them, but anytime you see like a division opponent, you can start to draw patterns there. And the fact that he's played Detroit well pretty much almost every time, and now he's got a week of playing under his belt, like unlike going into the Green Bay matchup where he hadn't played in so long. Like, I honestly don't mind it. He still had 3 touchdown passes in the Packers game. So I actually think you can play him this week.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think this game is almost like a must-win game for the Bears if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah.
So they're going to need to play the best that they can. Trubisky, I mean the the North Carolina football fan and basketball fan I am, I tweeted out when he was playing the Packers that he's a disgrace to North Carolina. That's just a Packer fan in me. But Trubisky, he has these periods where he looks pretty good, and then he has periods where he throws like 3 passes for 3 interceptions, 2 of them right to Darnell Savage. But this Bears, they need to win. I expect them to run the ball against Detroit. I think Detroit's in shambles. I don't think they win a game for the rest of the year without don't know who their coach is, whatever. I think they can run the ball in Detroit this week, and I think that it'll set up a lot of play action passes for Mitch Trubisky to make easier passes where he doesn't have to force balls downfield into triple coverage. So I'm okay with Mitch Trubisky if you absolutely need a quarterback. I think there's better options out there, but I think he might be a better play in DFS rather than regular fantasy football leagues.
Love him in DFS this week. These are Trubisky's last 4 games against Detroit, starting with this year and working back. This year he went for 242 with 3 touchdowns, also had 26 yards rushing. Time before that, he completed 76% of his passes, 338 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Before that, 173 with 3 touchdowns. Game before that, 355 with 3 touchdowns. And then the game before that, which was his rookie year, he passed for 314, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Obviously not as good of a game, but 3 touchdowns in each of his last 4 games. Certainly impressive for someone who's not very good at football. And I don't know, Detroit's not very good. So I think Trubisky is going to be, I love him for DFS, but I think if you're desperate in a deep league, I think he is viable.
I'm actually writing him down right now for DFS.
Yeah, I haven't seen his price yet, but I would assume it's very cheap. I'm sure he's cheaper than Mike Glennon, which is great. I don't need to stack him with anybody. I'll just put him in there and just play every other stud, essentially. Moving on to running backs here. I don't know where my sheet is. Here it is. Okay, running back. Obviously, the big one everyone's talking about. We'll talk about him first. Latavius Murray had 19 carries for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Game before that, 12 carries, 49 yards, 2 catches, 36 yards. That was his last game against Atlanta. Plays Atlanta again this week. 46.4% owned. With Taysom Hill in there, Taysom Hill's not really using Alvin Kamara as a receiver for whatever reason. A lot of times they use Kamara receiver just to kind of get to the edge and stuff like that. And they haven't needed to do that. They've been moving the offensive line with fakes with Taysom Hill. Kind of combines it into Tannehill, first and last name there. But since they can move that, it just opens up running lanes for Latavius Murray, and he's a better straight line runner than Alvin Kamara. So on that hand, I don't think this is a fluke. However, I'm not convinced Latavius Murray is a very good running back. So I'm interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Luke, you can start. What's your thoughts on Latavius Murray? Do you think we can expect the same type of production, or do you think he takes a drop off here?
I think he takes a drop off, but not like a ginormous drop off where he shouldn't be at least looked at. In our staff article we wrote, I put in a mention of Latavius Murray for pickups, but the way that the Saints have been looking to me, even with Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara, everyone healthy, Latavius Murray still gets the first running back snaps of the game from every Saints game that I've watched. So he has this role in this offense. They're gonna try to get him the ball going. If not, let's give it to Alvin Kamara because we know what Alvin Kamara can do. With Taysom Hill at quarterback, they just seem to be going to this power run sort of offense. Like Zach, like you said, Kamara hasn't seen his traditional role. He's not getting those little check downs. He's not getting those screen passes. I think they're trying to make this offense as easy for Taysom Hill as they can by handing it to a huge running back who can just put his head down and clobber himself right into holes. And that's what Latavius Murray has been his whole career. So that front, I really like Latavius Murray. Obviously, he's not, it's going to be tough for him to recreate. I don't know what he had, like 125 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. But I think they use him a lot going forward. They used him a lot when everyone was healthy. Without their passing quarterback, I feel like they're going to use him just as much as they used him last game. The only thing that does scare me, though, is what I talk about every single week with New England, is Taysom Hill takes those goal line rushing touchdowns from Latavius Murray. So I think rather than 125 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think it's more likely Latavius Murray gets around 60 to 75 yards, maybe a touchdown, as long as Drew Brees is out.
Yeah, I think 60 to 75 and a touchdown is pretty fair. Luke, I saw that you wrote about him in the article, so I was excited to hear you talk about him. I'm on the side that there's going to be a drop-off here. I don't think what I've seen from Latavius shows me that there's like a change in sort of how much the Saints want to use him. Like they always try to get him involved. Like you talked about how he'll come in on the first drive and they'll try to get him going. Taysom Hill hasn't had to play a game yet where he's been down, and I think when the Saints are ahead, that's a really nice game script for Latavius, and that's when he's going to get the ball. And they do play the Falcons though this week, and then they take on the Eagles next week. So maybe it's going to be a similar game script. Just like you said, Taysom Hill kind of takes away the potential goal line carries. You've seen him run in a few touchdowns already. So combined with that, and then the fact that Kamara is there and game scripts could be changing, I just feel like this is the best you've seen from Latavius. And I wouldn't be too confident throwing him in my lineup, but I could definitely see 60 to 75 in a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, I for sure think there's going to be a drop off. It just, how much. I think I'm okay with playing him as a flex. Outside of that, though, I just don't think he's that good. I think the Falcons' run defense is pretty good. Yeah, I think if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to be worthless. That's the only thing. And like you said, Luke, they keep running that quarterback power with Taysom Hill when they get down there, and it works every time. So, just from an X's and O's perspective, I would assume there's a fake coming soon. Does that fake mean it's going to be, he's going to give it to Murray and he's going to run him back, like do a cutback, and it's going to be wide open? Or is it going to be a pass? I think that's going to be something interesting to see. That probably happens this week, if not next week. But yeah, that's not going to keep happening. They can't run a quarterback power 3 weeks in a row. It's just not going to work. Next running back I have here, not someone I would start this week, assuming everyone's healthy, but Devontae Booker, back up to Josh Jacobs in Vegas. Jacobs dealing with an ankle issue. As of now, it seems like he's going to play. 5% owned for Devontae Booker. If Jacobs misses the game, Booker, I think, is going to be borderline RB1 value. He's one of those handcuffs that you have to own if you're a Jacobs owner going forward. Tanner, is there any other handcuffs that you can think of off the top of your head that you would think you need to own? It's just getting tougher in the NFL right now just because it's so much back by committee. There aren't very many other ones. I guess another one that pops into my mind is probably Jamal Williams. Well, not probably, for sure Jamal Williams if Aaron Jones gets hurt. But outside of those two, Devontae Booker's looked really good. What's your thoughts on Booker, and is there anybody else that you would pick up if you need a handcuff right now?
I totally agree that Devontae Booker has looked really good. I think I brought him up on like 2 or 3 shows ago, and Jacobs always seems to have some type of injury. So if Jacobs is not playing, then Booker is definitely a great start. And even if Jacobs is banged up, I think this might be the 1 week you could throw Booker in the lineup because they're playing the Jets, and I would assume the Jets are kind of good at stopping the run, but I would assume that the Raiders get up in that game and want to run the ball. So it's kind of tough. But yeah, definitely love Booker if Jacobs is out. He's looked really good when he's gotten the ball. And as far as other handcuffs go, the first one that popped in my head was Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams is interesting because he still kind of has flex value even with Aaron Jones in right now. So if Aaron Jones is out, then Jamal Williams is a great play. And I've been impressed with how he's played all season. And then, I don't like it, but if anything happens to Zeke, then Tony Pollard is a great player. Like I think Tony Pollard has looked better than Zeke over the last month of the season. So, I think Pollard probably should be owned if you can afford him.
Yeah, the Raiders too with Jacobs having an ankle injury. That's not really an injury you want to fuck around with for your star running back.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him, not even playing this week. You probably don't have to play him against the Jets,
Right.
which is just absolute fantasy gold for Devontae Booker owners. Just looking at Booker right now, he's available. He's only he's only rostered in 5% of leagues. He's out there in 95% of leagues. He's going to be available in your league. I say go ahead and pick him up. And if Josh Jacobs isn't there, you have exactly like you said, a running back one on your team sitting on your bench that you just picked up yesterday. But the only other one that comes to mind for running back handcuffs, we just talked about Latavius Murray. But I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on like Ito Smith from Atlanta? I think I like him more than Brian Hill. No.
I think they're gonna split. I think I like him more than Brian Hill right now, but I think they're gonna split snaps no matter what, which is unfortunate, I suppose. The other handcuff I was thinking, obviously Alexander Mattison for Minnesota. He had the bulk of the carries with Cook's gone out before. Cook's also banged up right now, but he seems to be fine. He just didn't perform super well in that start. But other than that, I don't know, I guess Carlos Hyde for Chris Carson. But he's pretty well owned just because Carson's been out. I don't know. JD
Yeah, I know we had this discussion like every single week. But now that Austin Eckler's back, the Chargers running backfield has become a lot more, kind of we know what's going to happen. Do you think I'll just go bring it back to the other ones? Let's say Austin Eckler goes down again. Is there one Chargers running back you like more than the others?
Absolutely not. I hate Anthony Lynn. I can't stand him. Did you see the quote he had this today?
Yeah, they're out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I told the team we're not going to make the playoffs. Attaboy, Lynn. What a motivator. Fucking
good to tell your rookie quarterback that.
Fucking he's horrible.
It's funny that Kelly finally scored the week Eckler was back.
Yeah, I can't take it. I can't stand it. I hate that team. I thought they were going to be so good. Son of a bitch. Okay, I have a few more running backs here. All spry and young, I would say. Let's start with Frank Gore. 19% owned, plays the Raiders this week. He's averaged over 4 yards per carry in back-to-back games. So obviously, my Frank Gore love is going to be overshine everything here, but he's over 4 yards per carry. That's good. Keeping him on schedule. 33 carries and 5 receptions over the past 2 games. So workload's there. Adam Gase calling plays again, so you know the workload's going to stay. He loves him some Frank Gore. He's got flex value against the Raiders. I don't care. They're going to move the ball against the Raiders, and I think he's going to be fine. We don't need to discuss him. Frank Gore speaks for himself. Next one, I think you wrote him up, Tanner, in our article on FlurrySports.org. I know I was debating between him and the next guy I'm going to talk about afterwards, but Cam Akers, a guy we talk about all the time. Super good at the football, 28% owned, touchdown back-to-back weeks, 9+ carries in 3 out of his last 4 games. Do you think, it's tough to predict, Sean McVay, do you think he's going to emerge now and keep a larger workload? Or do you think he's just going to continue to be back in that carousel, whoever has a hot hand, and that's how they're going to do it?
I think Sean McVay really is committed to using all 3 of these running backs. However, Malcolm Brown has seen 3 carries in each of the last 2 weeks. So 6 carries over the last 2 weeks, and like you said, Akers has 9+ carries in 3 of 4. And it's so clear how good Akers is. Like you saw it this week. He had that 61-yard run, and then they gave him the ball 2 more times, and he ran it in. Like they struggled to find offense all day. And they gave Akers the ball 3 times, and he took it down the entire field for them and scored. Mm-hmm. I love picking him up and taking the shot on him because he has a touchdown in 2 consecutive weeks, and he's been playable for 2 weeks in a row, and that's with the touches he's been getting. And I really think this might be the time where they start to give him more work. Darrell Henderson, I have it written down here, has been over the last 4 weeks the running back 38. 24, 57, and 61. So he hasn't been getting it done. I really think that this is the time where Akers like more work in this offense, and if he does, I think you're picking up a guy who could go off over the last month of the season. So it's like, why not take a shot on a player who could be that dude for you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I know this isn't the first time I said it. It's probably the last time I will say, or I won't talk about this narrative, but the Rams need to keep winning to win their division. I mean, in the toughest division of football, the best running back, Tanner and Zach, just like you said, that's looked the best is Cam Akers. I don't know why they would not at least try to get him going first every single game, because it obviously seems like their offense works the best when he's running the ball. I was looking up the stat last night and I fell asleep actually looking up the stat, so I never did. But I don't know if someone can pull it up or whatever, but I assume Cam Akers has the most rushing attempts over the since he came back from injury than the other two.
So 25 for Henderson over the past 3 weeks. And where's Akers? Akers has 24 over the past 3 weeks. So pretty much even between those two.
Yeah. So, I mean, that doesn't worry me because Tanner, just like you said, Cam Akers looked incredible against San Francisco. You would think they have to play Cam Akers because he's obviously the best out of them. But that just worries me because Sean McVay likes to outthink himself and then outthink himself a little bit more. And who knows? But, yeah, I think Cam Akers is for sure the best one to have from that backfield. And I think he has a lot of potential to, get you into the playoffs and get you a couple playoff victories.
I completely agree. He needs to be owned for sure if you have the space. And hopefully we see some kind of stability. He's one of those players. I've owned him the entire season. And it's frustrating because even if he had a big spike performance, which he didn't, but even if he did in like a week 6 or something, like I would want to play him so bad, but you can't trust a guy in a committee like this. So hopefully if he can get if he can get double-digit carries this week and another touchdown, maybe I can try to trust him in the playoffs here. But the guy I wrote up in the low-owned players article to pick up for the playoffs here, again on FlurrySports.org, we all chipped in on that one. I wrote up James White. Wisconsin guy, I love James White anyways. His team loves him, rallied around him after that tragedy earlier in the year. Rex Burkhead went down season-ending injury a couple weeks ago. They have any other pass-catching running backs. They have Damian Harris, who they refused to use in the passing game. They have Sony Michel, who's not good at football and also can't catch. So it's James White there. And then after that, they don't really use their wide receivers in the passing game very well either, mostly because the throws Cam Newton can't make. So if they get into an up-pace kind of game, I think James White's really going to thrive. If they need to come back, I think James White's going to thrive. And then last week, for whatever reason, he rushed for 2 touchdowns, which, cool, I'll take it. So if he's going to get 5 carries in back-to-back games as well, I love him. I think he's going to have, for sure, low-end RB2 PPR value the rest of the way. They play the Chargers this week. Again, I fully expect Chargers to get up and blow this game, which means Patriots are going to be coming back, passing a lot. Perfect for James White. They play the Rams after that. James White is going to need to take those dump-offs with the pass rush coming at Cam there. Then Miami and Buffalo are must-win weeks, and they're going to be doing the same thing there. So I really like the schedule for James White. Again, PPR, he is much, much more valuable. But Luke, what's your thoughts on White here?
Just side note here, I think that game, the Chargers-Patriots game, is going to be the one I'm most excited to watch next week. Even though the Packers play the Eagles, it's just going to be, I feel like it's going to be a weird kind of game, but whatever. I don't know if you watched the Patriots game, but I had Damian Harris, and they were on the goal line. They motioned Damian Harris out of the backfield, motioned James White into the backfield, and tossed him, and James White scored a touchdown. Hey. So if you're going to design plays like that, sure. But you're right, Cam Newton can't throw the ball. Receivers can't, when they does, the passing game is just like non-existent in New England. Besides James White, and that's not a bad spot to be in if you're contemplating picking up James White or have him. So I think especially if you're like a Rex Burkhead owner, you need to 100% pick up James White. And I think you start him right as soon as you pick him up because you talked about it's a nice schedule. Even if it is a bad schedule, James White is like one of the only, him and Damian Harris are like the only two sparks in that offense. So, I mean, I think James White is like an excellent pickup going into this fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, I thought James White was a must pick up once Burkhead went down with the injury. So I picked him up in one of my leagues and started him this week, and he came through because he had the 2 touchdowns. But I feel like I got lucky on it because the reason I picked him up was the receptions and being involved in the receiving game, which is where I thought the points were going to come from. And then like on the goal line touchdowns, like Damian Harris ran it down to like the 1 yard line on the play before, and then there was that weird motion, like you said, Luke, and then he ran it in. So like I almost feel lucky I got the 2 touchdowns from him, but I'll take them. But I do think going forward there will be more receptions than the one he saw this week. I mean, if you look, I was like he only had one, but then you look at the rest of the pass catchers and it's 5 receptions and 3 receptions. Cam Newton completed 9 passes in the game. Yeah, if they're coming, like I love James White, I think he's super talented, and if they're coming from behind, then I think he's going to be really good. Like low end RB2 value, like you said, think is exactly where I would put him, and then especially in PPR leagues with those receptions.
Only other running back I have written down here is Benny Snell. James Conner today was out with COVID. Conner, obviously one of those high risk players, had cancer, came back from cancer. So I don't know his symptoms. I don't know if they're severe. I don't know if he's asymptomatic. But it certainly seems like he would be one of the people who deals with COVID a little bit harder. Same type of thing with Mark Andrews over in Baltimore. He's type 1 diabetic. He's probably going to take a little bit longer to bounce back, even if they are active. Benny Snell's a really good running back, so if James Conner stays out, which I think they can certainly keep him out, he's not much better than Benny Snell anyways. He needs to be picked up. Owned in 25% of leagues. Plays Washington this week. That's not too bad of a matchup. Watch the injury report. Obviously, they don't need to give updates on people on the COVID list, which is tough. But he is somebody that you need to have. Talking about handcuffs, I suppose I should have brought him up. He is definitely the handcuff to James Conner, whether Jalen Samuel is active or not. Is there any other running backs you guys would like to bring up here?
Yeah, I think J.K. Dobbins is really similar to Cam Akers in the sense that you're looking at both 2 talented rookie running backs. And like Akers, I think Dobbins is the best running back in that backfield. And if you look at week 11, so the last game Dobbins played, he was the leader of that backfield. Like Mark Ingram has been super ineffective this season and continues to look that way. And Dobbins had 15 carries against Tennessee for 70 yards, and he got in the end zone. He had 2 catches for 15 yards, 17 fantasy points and half-point PPR. And I don't know, that game just felt a little different to me. It felt like they really were relying on him in that game, and he just kept making plays and churning out yards all game. And then he takes on Dallas this upcoming week. You just saw what Antonio Gibson did against them, and the Ravens' schedule really opens up after that. So I see him really similar to Akers in the sense that I think he's a player that you want to take a shot on going forward.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The other one I was going to bring up, the Denver backup running back. Do you think that warrants any consideration? I know Philip Lindsay's hurt right now, but I mean, if Melvin Gordon goes down, Royce Freeman's the next top dog then, right?
Yes. He's for sure the next top dog. And I've seen other people talking about him too. I suppose he has like low end flex value if something happens. I don't think he's that great. And then it's that same type of situation where, is he going to score a touchdown? I don't necessarily trust the Broncos to get down there in scoring range. Could he be fine? Sure. If he's definitely a handcuff, so if you have Melvin Gordon, Philip Lindsay is still out, and you have an open space, you definitely need to have him. Like if you're starting Melvin Gordon, you should have the backup. But outside of that, I don't think he has much value. Wide receivers here, quite a few good ones. 2 I have just like written down. I don't think we need to discuss them because we discuss them pretty much literally every week. Cole Beasley, Corey Davis, both under the 60% mark. If they're out there, pick them up. Next one, I'm surprised he's still low. Michael Pittman Jr. When we were writing up our article, I messaged Henry, like, I assume he's, like, someone's writing about him, because I wanted to pick someone nobody else did. Michael Pittman Jr. needs to be owned. He was the one I would vouch for out of everybody here to pick up. 37% owned, plays at Houston this week, 7+ targets or touchdown in each of the last 4 games. Big target, athletic target. Philip Rivers loves him. I guess he had a bad game, but I don't know. I don't think you need to overthink it. Michael Pittman Jr. needs to be owned in fantasy. Tanner, anything to add to that?
We talked about him last week or 2 weeks ago, and he was both of our number 1 pickup. And I still think he's a really strong pickup if he's out there right now. Colts have a pretty favorable schedule going forward, and they're going to need to win these games, like you've been saying, Luke, and Pittman's going to be a part of that passing game. T.Y. Hilton was the one who got mostly involved this week. He caught the touchdown, but I just like what I've seen from Pittman so far, and I love the draft capital. I know they want to use him. He's been involved a lot, so I think he's one of the better pickups on the waiver wire right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have really much to add other than I think he's a stud receiver. You know, he's athletic, he's tall, he's going to grab Philip Rivers' ducks.
You brought him up. Let's talk about T.Y. Hilton. 4 catches, 81 yards, and touchdown last week. 45% owned. People jump ship. Is it time to jump back on the ship? Plays at Houston, and this is the trend I love to take every single year. It didn't work for me last year, but T.Y. Hilton against Houston is money almost every time. These are his games for his career at Houston. Again, inside, loves the turf at Houston, starting with his rookie year. So 3 catches, 78 yards, touchdown. Then 7 catches, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then 9 catches, 223 yards, touchdown. 5 catches, 88 yards. 3 catches, 49 yards. 5 catches, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. 9 catches, 199 yards. And then last year, obviously, Jacoby Brissett, all of that. 3 catches, 18 yards. He was hurt for that game as well. Played in only 37% of the snaps. But yeah, he's healthy right now. Loves playing at Houston, clearly. And again, talking about DFS plays, he's a boom DFS play that I'm certainly going to target this week. See if that trend can continue. And if you have that roster spot, I would like to pick him up before anything happens, because certainly he will be a top waiver ad if he has one of those games again. And we talked about his schedule: at Houston, at Vegas, home against Houston, and then at Pittsburgh, which isn't a terrible matchup for these outside receivers. Matchup's nice. And talking about both Colts wide receivers really reinforces my love for Philip Rivers going forward. Luke, do you like T.Y. Hilton or Michael Pittman Jr. this week and beyond?
Yeah, I like them both. I think I like Michael Pittman Jr. more. But just to talk a little bit about T.Y. Hilton, I might have been like the biggest T.Y. Hilton hater this whole year. And in classic 2020 football fashion, he's probably going to be the player that I end up picking up, and he's going to win me a championship. But T.Y. Hilton, he's been around for a while. He's led the league in receiving 1 year. So he's a good receiver. He can make plays. And Zach, just like you said, he usually kills Houston. I know we talk all the time with Trevor on our other show about all these stupid trends and stuff. But I like that trend, I think, the most that we've talked about. It's an indoor game. There won't be, any weather or anything to affect Philip Rivers' balls. So I'm totally on, T.Y. Hilton. He's still that deep threat. He can still take a post route, 60, 70 yards for a touchdown. I think Michael Pittman sees a little bit more receptions coming his way. But I think they might use Michael Pittman to set up T.Y. Hilton for some deep shots. And I think T.Y. Hilton will outperform Michael Pittman, but Michael Pittman will have catches, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I on any T.Y. Hilton related thing, I was going to be just a no on, just because he has this last game was his only game of the season with over 10 fantasy points. But I would have never. I don't think I would have drawn the Houston connection if you hadn't started talking about it. And then to see that he gets Houston in 2 of the next 3,
That's what I'm saying. I love it.
that's yeah. My gut is actually really telling me Ty over Pittman right now. Like he has 4 catches, 3 catches, 4 catches the last 3 weeks. Like I feel like he's gonna have a big game in at least one of those. So I mean, can I say I like them equally?
Start them both. Stack them with Phillip Rivers and DFS. Take down a million maker. I mean, this is what I'm gonna be doing this week. I love T.Y. Hilton against Houston. It's made me plenty of money over the years. Let's talk about another 2 teammates, under-owned wide receivers. I talk about the Jets too much. I've become cheered for the Jets this year for whatever reason. I just think it's fun. But Denzel Mims, Rashad Perriman. So let's start with Mims, owned in 5% of leagues, plays Vegas this week. 8 targets in each of his last 3 games, 60-plus yards in each of his last 3 games, 40-plus yards in every game he's played, which is 5. He needs to be owned. He's getting used a lot. He's a really, really good player on a really bad team. Obviously, touchdowns aren't there. What can he do? He's going to get one eventually. Why not this week? Rashad Perriman's the other one, 14% owned, double-digit points and 50-plus yards in 4 of his last 5 games. He's the deep threat. He's healthy. He looks really good as well. As bad as Sam Darnold is, he got them both production last week, and I don't think Darnold's going to play as bad as he did last week. That may have been his worst game ever as a pro. I don't know. I like them both quite a bit. I think I would personally side with Mims. But Tanner, what's your thoughts on these 2 Jets receivers?
Yeah, I do like the 8 targets and 3 straight. I had that written down, but between the 2, I would go with Perriman just because not all targets are made equally, and 8 targets on a Jets team isn't exactly the same. So I like Perriman as the deep option a little bit more. And he's been getting it done more than Mims has, like you said, double digits in 4 of his last 5. So between those 2 there, I would just follow the production and take the guy who's more likely to get that big play.
Yeah, Tanner, I was gonna say the same thing if you said you'd rather have Mims. So I'll go on a little bit of a stretch here with the Jets. Do you think this is a case where they might feature Rashad Perriman a little bit more in hopes of like trading him in the offseason to garner some draft picks, make him look good? But then going off that, this is how my brain works. Going off that, I think they try to feature Mims to convince Trevor Lawrence that he wants to play for the Jets and that there's going to be that connection there. So I don't know. I think it's a horse apiece here, but I think Perriman does have the better shot of giving you a bigger week than Denzel Mims does.
He certainly has the better shot, like Tanner was saying, getting that 50-yard touchdown or something like that.
Right.
Sam Darnold, man, he is so fucking bad at football. He is not good, and you can't blame it on Adam Gase. I'm sick of that lazy take. It's Sam Darnold. And he took the whole thing about sit and learn from Flacco to heart a little bit too much, because before, Sam Darnold would check down every time. That's why Jameson Crowder's like 15 catches, 20 targets a game. Last week, he avoided throwing within 5 yards. He had people doing jumping jacks trying to get him the ball. He would just close his eyes and fucking whip it downfield, looking just like Joe Flacco, except for worse because Flacco can make those throws. That's the only throws Flacco can make. Boy, it was bad. I hope there's a little bit regress to the mean a little bit here, and he gets Crowder more involved. And then the question is, if Crowder gets involved, which receiver does it hurt? I don't really know the answer. I would assume Perriman, just because they don't target deep, but I don't know. In short, I think this Jets receiving core is really good. I think they're a lot better than people give them credit for. They just have a really terrible coach and quarterback. Other receivers. Okay. Another one, probably the most talked about one this week, and I get it. Kiki Cootie, whatever, for Houston. Will Fuller is suspended for the rest of this year, and I believe week 1 next year. Cootie, everyone's saying, is going to jump right into that wide receiver 2 role, which is perfect if he could play the wide receiver 2 role. Will Fuller is a very clear, good outside wide receiver. Cootie is a slot receiver. He is operated in the slot. That is why he is a backup, because they brought in Randall Cobb to play the slot role, so Cootie moved behind him. He has played almost exclusively slot for his entire career. He is 5'11". He is not an outside receiver. So I would assume the Texans don't just put him on outside receiver. If they activate Randall Cobb, I don't think they put him at outside receiver because he hasn't done it for his entire career. So I think the wide receiver to pick up, if you're desperate, I would rather just not pick anybody out personally. But I sent these guys who I like is Isaiah Coulter. He's a rookie from Rhode Island, hasn't played a single snap all year. So if you want to look like a genius in a really deep league, I think this is the guy to pick up. I think he gets maybe 40% of the snaps this week. There's somebody else on the Texans roster that I'll talk about in the tight end section that I like more. But I think Coulter is going to be the outside receiver. 6'3", extremely athletic guy, played outside receiver for Rhode Island. 12 games, 11 starts in his junior year, went to the draft early, had 1,039 yards, 8 touchdowns, extremely athletic, okay speed, terrible route runner, super raw. If they had a coach, I would feel much better about this because I would assume they'd want to develop this guy and say, hey, let's see what we have in him. Let's see if we can get him involved. Romeo Crennel's not going to be the coach next year. I would assume pretty much nobody on the entire coaching staff is going to be there next year. So, and they don't have a GM. So are they really going to be trying to develop players? That's the hard part about this. But if they do, for whatever reason, feel like, hey, maybe they're going to come back and they are going to try to develop players, Coulter is very clearly the guy to develop, not Cootie, who has been in the league 3 years and has done nothing outside of his debut, which he had like 100 yards in 2018. Now, I know every other fantasy company and everyone's talking about how Cootie might be one of the top pickups this week. After hearing what I said, I guess Tanner, Luke, we can start. Are you more so wanting to pick up one of these players or avoid the situation completely?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tanner.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm avoiding it. Like you, Zach, I'm not high on QT at all. Like I was talking to my dad earlier, and he was like, he has to be a pickup this week, right? But just the way I see it is, he's had all of the opportunity throughout his 3-year career to try and emerge at this point, and he hasn't done it yet at all, really. And there's a reason they brought in Cooks and Randall Cobb, and QT hasn't seen any playing time. And with Will Fuller going down and Cobb and IR, I still don't think that really changes a lot. I don't think they really want to rely on him / can rely on him. Does he get a boost? Maybe, but he's definitely not a guy I would want to start. So I almost like the other guy more. I forget his name. Isaiah Coulter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost rather take a shot on him just for the unknown. Right. And like, maybe this guy is really good, even though I don't really have much confidence in that either. And you've seen Watson lean on tight ends in the past a lot when he has to. So I would just be avoiding like other wide receivers in this offense.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think Will Fuller going out, Cobb dealing with the injury, I think that boosts the tight ends more than it boosts any receiver on the Texans.
Agreed.
I'm still wildly shocked that Deshaun Watson is able to play so well without like any weapons at all on his team. That's just hats off to good football by Deshaun Watson. But I don't, Coulter, I remember looking at him when the draft came around. Not thinking of him until Zach, you sent us something 10 minutes or a half hour before the show started. But I remember him reminding me a little bit of Robert Woods kind of player, where you can take like a little screen and get some yards after the catch with it. Yeah, I'm all on board for rather picking up Coulter because, if it works out, you get to stick it to everyone in your fantasy league that you're the genius of the league. But the unknown is it's kind of fun to play with in fantasy football. I definitely don't think you're going to pick him up and start him until you see a couple games from him. So I don't think it hurts to pick Coulter up and leave him on your bench maybe 1-2 weeks. If it doesn't work out, drop him and pick him up for another player we tell you to pick up in 1-2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a situation to avoid unless it's a deep league or even a dynasty league. I'm willing to pick him up or Coulter up for this. Like we talked about, we are almost in fantasy playoffs, so there's no time to have any confidence in them. We've talked about many other wide receivers already. There's a lot of people out there that are low owned that carry quite a bit of value. So I don't think you need to go to Coulter. This is more so us, or at least me, I would assume you guys agree, telling you don't rush to pick up QE. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I don't think I have any other wide receivers. Do you guys have anybody else you want to talk about?
I in our article I wrote about Josh Reynolds, who I think is going to have a great rest of the year because the Rams. Let me pull it up here, but they play Arizona, New England, and Seattle, and the Jets. The Jets should be a win. I think everyone gets involved in that offense. I know there's a lot of weapons, but I think everyone gets involved against the Jets. But those other teams, Arizona, New England, Seattle, are all going to be needing wins to solidify playoff spots. And I think if that's the case, they look to guard whoever's, whatever their game script is, whoever, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. And I think Josh Reynolds will be forgotten about a lot the next 4 weeks. And with his ability, just like Robert Woods, take those short little passes and get a bunch of yards after the catch with them. I think that's huge for this Rams offense. And I think it's someone who Jared Goff might go to a lot. The running game, we just talked about it. We don't know what's going on with the running game. The short passes are how this Rams offense works. And I think Josh Reynolds is a great one for Jared Goff to take crossing routes and have him take a couple of yards.
Yeah, like people were starting to get on Reynolds, and he had one bad game, and now everyone's like, okay, well, we're off now. He could very clearly come back and get 6, 7, 8 targets again. So he should be a part of this offense going forward. Yeah, I don't trust McVay, but he definitely should be. You're right.
Yeah, because, like you said, he had one bad game, but also the Rams offense just wasn't good at all in that Niners game. Like, in general, like, everybody had a bad game. So, if they play a defense that's not as tough as the Niners seem like they're turning it around after last week for sure, getting some people back. Like, the Rams are moving the ball. Reynolds is seeing, feels like 5 to 8 targets on a weekly basis. So.
Yeah, and then I just had one more here, just off the top of my head that I talk about every week. I think Jacoby Myers is still an option to pick up. I think he's owned in less than 60%. He might even be less than 50%. Mm-hmm. But like we said, Cam Newton only had 9 completions last week. Jacoby Myers had 5 receptions. So he's getting over half the completions. When Cam Newton's throwing the ball, it's going to Jacoby Myers. It just, the volume's there. It's just what is Jacoby Myers going to do with it,
Yeah, that's another one. He had a bad game, and people completely jumped off the ship. Like against Houston, because Bird had a good game. Everyone's like, yeah, now it's Bird again. Inconsistencies are scary, but it's not inconsistencies with Myers, I don't think. It's with his quarterback, which doesn't make anything better. But yeah, in must-win games coming up, I would assume Cam has to throw more. I don't know. I would assume they're good teams coming up. One wide receiver I didn't bring up, just really quick, Tim Patrick for the Broncos, 15% owned. Plays at Kansas City this week, so I would assume the Broncos have to pass quite a bit to keep up. Double-digit points in 6 of his last 7 games, excluding last week's disaster of a game. So he's going to be involved, especially with a real quarterback taking snaps. Tanner, you got anybody, or should we move on to tight ends?
I don't have anybody else. I'll just throw out Debo really quick. He doesn't fall under the 60%, but I just got to give him respect because sometimes I watch him play and I'm like, this dude's the best receiver in the league. Like, yeah, he's amazing. And then I'll talk a little bit about Sorry, I'm blanking. Who did you just talk about?
Uh,
Jacoby Myers.
Tim Patrick.
Tim Patrick. Yeah, sorry. Uh, like, I mean, he's getting an actual quarterback back, and I just feel like he's so unexciting, so nobody wants to own him. Like, I know I don't want to own him,
Yeah.
but the production he's used on a weekly basis. So, like, if you want to like guarantee points in your lineup, I feel like he's a good pick.
Yeah, as much as nobody wants to believe it. I mean, he's a very big part of this offense. And if the running game gets hurt, then he's going to see his role only grow. Okay, tight ends. Let's talk about Houston. Um, Tweeting out this again really quick. With Will Fuller going down, I think the player to see the biggest jump is Jordan Atkins. He is a vertical threat. He's the only other vertical threat on this team. I don't think Brandon Cooks is that great of a vertical threat. So I would assume Jordan Atkins is the only one. He might be the only player that's not blocking for Deshaun Watson that's over 6 feet tall, especially if they do put Cootie out there. Yeah, really like Atkins. Matchup this week against the Colts is a tough one, so I don't know if I want to start him. He's probably going to be there to pick up next week for the Chicago game, which is a pretty good matchup. But yeah, he's already had 5 receptions, 83 yards a couple weeks ago. He's had big performances. Not a good guy from what I heard off the field, but on-field production's pretty good, and I like him quite a bit. Luke, you were talking about how you think the tight end see a benefit. Was Atkins one you were thinking of, or is it Darren Fells?
Yeah, it's 100% Atkins to me. Just like you said, he's like the only receiving threat on this team because I don't think Cooks is that good of a receiver either. But that's kind of hypocritical coming from me because I know like in the middle of the season I was talking about how much I like who's the other tight end you got there?
Fells?
Yeah, how much I like Fells because he's just going to fall in the end zone. But that's when Atkins was hurt. Atkins is back. I think, Deshaun Watson is going to play that schoolyard football, or he's going to be running around the backfield, making plays by himself, and Atkins is going to be the big target who's going to be open in the middle of the field. I think Atkins falls into the end zone, going for the rest of the season, maybe 3, 4, or 5 times before the season ends. So I think Atkins might be, a sneaky pick that you can pick up and, start him on a weekly basis.
Yeah, like I really think Watson has shown that he isn't afraid to utilize and rely on his tight ends, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think Atkins gets the biggest boost from the Will Fuller injury, and I think he needs to be used. And so like on paper and like it's all there for me. He's just been so inconsistent. Like he'll have one catch one week, and then he'll go for 580 for 83 like he did, and so it's tough. Would you guys drop Jonnu, who just had 0 catches, for Atkins?
Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like when it gets cold weather, Tennessee likes to rely on Derrick Henry and AJ Brown a lot more than anyone else on their team.
Jonnu, every once in a while he gets one play, and that's it. Like he's just doesn't have a big enough role with AJ Brown healthy, unfortunately.
And he started off the season really hot, and then
Yeah.
he had that injury, and he just hasn't put together a really solid game since. So I just wonder if maybe that's still nagging or something.
Well, that also coincides with AJ Brown. He was out then too.
That's true. That's true.
Like, there's only so many targets to go around when Derrick Henry's running over 5 people at once. And Corey Davis is actually, performing consistently well as well. And then Ferkser is playing okay as the number 2 tight end. So yeah, there's a lot of targets to go around. A lot of mouths to feed and not a lot of targets, I should say. Another tight end here, Logan Thomas. Talk about him every single week. Owned in a quarter of leagues. Tough matchup against Pittsburgh, whatever. Top 10 tight end in 4 of the last 6 weeks in half PPR. He's going to continue to perform. He continues to see targets. Do I want to start him against Pittsburgh? Not necessarily. But, he has just as much of a chance to score as, I don't know, who's a top 10 guy right now. I'm looking at the consensus rankings. People have Ebron. I think he's just as good as Ebron. Hayden Hurst, Robert Tanyan, Hunter Henry. I think he's in that conversation. I don't think he's any less valuable than any of those players. So he needs to be owned in well over half of leagues for sure. Any additional thoughts, Tanner, on Logan Thomas? I mean, we bring him up every week.
Yeah, one thing I will say about him is Washington's competing for a playoff spot right now, and I like having players down the stretch that are in those situations because I know the team is going to be on the ball trying to win every game. So I just like that Logan will be a part of that for the rest of the season.
I'll say this too about Logan Thomas. Everyone who watches the show knows how much I love him. I talk about him every week. But I don't know if it was just because they were on Thanksgiving against a divisional rival on national TV or whatever. But he threw a pass, against Dallas.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're trying to incorporate any, more trick plays with him. He was a quarterback in college, so there's always that option too.
He's a great athlete. He's just a really good all-around player. If they had a higher volume passing offense, he would be talked about a lot more. Now Trey Burton in a tight end by committee for the Colts. How fun is that? But he does have touchdowns in back-to-back games, 11 targets in those 2 games, so he's getting used. If there is one pass catcher to own out of the 3, it certainly is Burton. When they get down near the goal line, they clearly can't run the football very well, so they are using Trey Burton. We also saw him take rushing touchdowns in earlier in the year. So talking about a game at Houston where the Colts should be able to pass and run with relative ease between the 20s, I think he has, again, just as much of a chance to score a touchdown this week as any other tight end that you could play, and that's including Travis Kelce. Luke, do you have any additional thoughts on Trey Burton?
I wrote in my tight end streaming article last week that you guys might have a different opinion, but it seems to me that Trey Burton come out as like Phil Rivers' favorite tight end in this offense. I think I think he gets the most receptions, and that's a plus to it. He's not going to do anything big because we just talked about how much we love both Michael Pittman and T.Y. Hilton this week. So it's hard to imagine Trey Burton's going to get anything more than 2 or 3 catches. But what could happen is those 2 or 3 catches go for 2 or 3 touchdowns. It's wild, this tight end situation in the NFL right now.
I definitely agree with you, Luke, that he's his favorite tight end option. And I feel like I talk about Trey Burton a lot on these episodes. And I just think he's a talented player that was supposed to be good when he went to Chicago and then never was. And then Frank Reich got him back. And now he's just like, he seems to catch a touchdown like every other week. So, and the Colts are moving the ball on offense. So that gives him like more red zone trips than a guy like Logan Thomas is going to get.
Right. Yeah, the scoring opportunities is there, and then his production and usage in these scoring positions is so high where like you just can't discredit it at all. The only other tight end I have here is Dalton Schultz. Tough matchup again at Baltimore. We did see Eric Ebron wide open pretty much all day. He just couldn't catch the football today. That happens with him. But Dalton Schultz, 26 targets over his last 4 games, 5+ targets in each of those games. Andy Dalton likes to use him. I think we said it earlier in the season with him, he just kind of took a dip when he didn't have a quarterback. He has a really safe floor. He continues to be the underneath guy. So if you need safe points, especially in PPR, I think you could do worse than Dalton Schultz. He's another one that doesn't necessarily excite me. Tanner, anything else about Schultz?
No, you pretty much covered it all right there. I like that he sees that amount of targets on a weekly basis, and I don't think that's going to change. So when you throw him in your lineup, that's what you're getting. I don't think a touchdown is very likely with how the Cowboys are playing right now, but at least you're going to get that floor of receptions.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. You're going to get probably 4 or 5 receptions for 35, 40 yards, and then everything else he does is, just extra on top of that. So, I mean, however many points you had, because you're going to get at least 7, 8, 9 in PPR.
Would you guys start a guy like Schultz where like the ceiling or the floor is so much higher, ceiling might be lower. Would you rather start Schultz or somebody like Jordan Atkins, like we're talking about? There is that level of unknown, but at least us three are projecting a usage bump for him. So, Luke, which way would you go on those two?
I know what you mean. I'll just take Jordan Atkins, like literally. I think I'd rather much have Jordan Atkins just because there's no other player there. But if we're going with like a player with like an unknown, tight ends are just so weird that I think you can go with a player with an unknown because it's very possible that unknown players are going to score a touchdown, and it's very possible that Dalton Schultz doesn't score a touchdown, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of it comes down to who I'm playing that week. Like, if I'm playing a guy whose team he's like top of the league and I know he's going to put up points, then I like to go with a more boom bust guy in that situation. But like, I'm playing a guy who's at the bottom of the league this week, and I just need one more win in the next 2 weeks to make that week 15 playoff. So I would rather take somebody like Schultz just because I don't think he's going to put up a lot of points. So at least if I guarantee myself points right there, then I feel comfortable.
That's very true. I was just looking at some of the ownership from these other tight ends. One that really jumps out to me that a lot of people probably are still starting, but I would drop him for any of the ones we've talked about. Jared Cook, owned in 72.5% of leagues. I would assume started in probably close to half of fantasy leagues on ESPN right now. Last 3 weeks, he's had 1 catch total. He's had 5 targets total. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 8. I just think he is very, very droppable. I understand the matchup against Atlanta looks really nice. Then he has Philadelphia, Kansas City, Minnesota. That looks really nice. I just don't see the need to keep Jared Cook, especially if Michael Thomas is motivated to play football for a quarterback that didn't say racist things, which is totally what's happening there. I don't know, Tanner, what's your thought? Do you think Jared Cook is a must drop? Or if you are an owner of Jared Cook, are you still trying to hang on to him with that schedule?
Yeah, I'm dropping him.
Okay.
I mean, in 3 weeks, what was it, 1 catch?
Yeah.
Yeah, that like I think you have to drop him. Like you're trying to make the playoffs right now, and like you can't start a guy like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's I think I would drop him for like the 3 or 4 players we just talked about, but it's kind of hard dropping a tight end who has been like a name in the NFL the last couple of years to pick up a tight end that it's just weird. Jared Cook is kind of like out of my Eric Ebron category, where I thought maybe 2 years ago that Jared Cook every single week was going to be Jared Cook week, and it never was. Eric Ebron slowly dropping out of that too. So yeah, I don't think you're gonna feel bad about yourself if you drop Jared Cook.
I hope not. I hope I don't feel bad about myself for doing it because I don't have him, I guess. But yeah, to your point, tight end more than any other position is so value driven, from ownership to experts rankings to everything. Like name value is everything. That's why Mark Andrews was a top 3 tight end for most experts every single week. That's why Jonnu Smith is owned in 78% leagues. That's why Jared Cook, what did I say, owned in 72.5% of leagues. He hasn't done anything. Jimmy Graham is still owned in half. Are you off of Jimmy Graham yet, Luke, or no?
Yeah, I dropped him many weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's so many, and someone like Richard Rodgers needs to perform. He's owned in 6. Jordan Atkins 4.5. Obviously, that's going to go up. I don't know. There's just a lot of players that perform well that no one cares about. I don't know. It's really strange. Any other tight ends you guys want to talk about?
I was gonna bring up. I know he's owning like a little more than 6% of leagues, but I think that George Kittle might be a good pickup. I just read that there's Kyle Shanahan is hoping he can come back in 2 to 3 weeks. So if that's plausible at all, I think George Kittle is probably going to be owned, pretty quick here. grab him if you can, because the tight ends are so bad. He's top 2 tight end in the NFL when he's healthy.
If let's say he comes back week 15, would you throw him in your lineup for a playoff matchup?
Immediately.
Yeah, I would too.
I think you have to. Like if he's healthy and they're saying he's healthy.
Yeah, he's just such a big part of that San Francisco offense. I think you have to throw him in.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at it. Yeah, if they told me you get George Kittle for 20% of the snaps, I think I would play him over almost every single tight end. And his stretch the last few weeks, so starting in week 14, it's Washington, Dallas, Arizona, Seattle. So there isn't a bad matchup either.
Yeah, I think it's very likely that George Kittle, they activate him off the injury for the week 16, the fantasy football championship, and that'd be a nice pickup right before the fantasy football championship.
Sure would. Sure would. Another player that's, I would assume, comes back this week, owned in 61.6% of leagues, so just over it, is Zach Ertz. He plays who? Green Bay. Ooh, look at us. So I would assume Zach Ertz has a very good game. And yeah, we saw what Richard Rodgers has been doing, which is surprisingly good. Zach Ertz is, dare I say, a better player than Richard Rodgers, and pretty much everything except for Hail Marys. Richard Rodgers has that down pat, but Zach Ertz is going to immediately be a big part of this offense. I think Carson Wentz actually may look good with Zach Ertz back as well. Yeah, he needs to be picked up. He is the number 1 tight end pickup if he's out there.
Yeah, totally agree.
On the show yesterday, we got a question on YouTube, and he was asking if he should sit Ebron for Richard Rodgers or one of the Seahawks tight ends. And we both said you should just stick with Ebron, but it was like coming down if the game would get canceled or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yeah, I would definitely. I ruled out the Seahawks tight ends, and I was like, okay, it's Richard Rodgers or Ebron, and I know it's a risk because the game might get canceled, but I was like, stick with Ebron. And then Richard Rodgers caught that 32-yard touchdown. I was like, oh man, I hope this guy doesn't lose because of that.
Yeah, Ebron had a decent day. Would have had a much better day if he knew how to catch, but he had a pretty good day too.
I wonder who has a record for most caught Hail Marys in their career, because 2's got to be pretty high.
2 is very high. There hasn't been very successful, like, walk-off Hail Marys. Like, there's been a lot less than you would think, and he has 2. He's the man. Okay, so top pickups of the week. I'm going to exclude Michael Pittman Jr. just because, I don't know. I've picked him before. He for sure should be owned. Man, I almost want to say Philip Rivers, even though it's a quarterback. I really like Philip Rivers down the stretch here. I'm really, really thinking this is... Maybe I'm overthinking this. I'm really thinking about picking up Philip Rivers and playing him over Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's been bad.
Yeah.
And Philip Rivers he's the man. He's been playing really well. I don't know. I think I'm crazy for that. I'm going to say my top pickup's Philip Rivers, so. Luke, who's yours?
James White. Well, I think 100%.
Yeah.
Just such a big part of the offense. Especially, we saw what Rex Burkhead was doing. I think Patriots use that 2 running back set. Can't even stay on the ball. It's either going to Jacoby Myers or James White.
Man, usually I feel like I can pick my answer pretty easily on these shows, but I'm really struggling with 3 guys here. At the quarterback position, I want to say like it's Tannehill for me. Like I almost want to say he's my top pickup, so I just want to throw him out there. I think I'm going to start him over Kyler this week. I love the matchup against Cleveland, and Kyler's shoulder really does worry me right now. Like he has not looked the same for a game and a half since he injured it, and I'm just worried about it. But my top pickup, I'm gonna say Akers. I wrote about him in the article. I think this is the time when he starts to see more work, and he's got fresh legs because he hasn't been getting a lot of carries all year.
True.
So, like, I don't know how you can not play a guy more when you're trying to make the playoffs who played as well as he did in that game. So it's Akers for me.
That's funny you said that, Tanner. That how many best running backs on their team have fresh legs coming into week 13 here?
That's just what he was planning, I'm sure, all along. I hope you're right. I hope this is the true Cam Akers come out game. But we will see. So today's Wednesday. Thursday, we'll be back with our ranking show. Friday, I think we'll be doing the start sit show. Interesting week of football. But we will be back tomorrow. Okay, I had ideas I was going to say, but we will talk off air. Okay, so we'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, for the ranking show. Luke, Trevor, and I later.